I'm going to try to convince the computer that...
Everybody's dead! You did it!
I wish to study man, his fragile mind.
I've got a premature detonation on dome number 2, and I've got an explosion.
Silent Running, 1972. Really got to me. Bruce Dern plays this dedicated botanist maintaining the last forests of Earth aboard a space freighter with only these incredible robot companions. Those little drones, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, they weren't fancy CGI, just clever costumes worn by amputee actors. But somehow that made them feel more real, you know? I remember sitting there in the dark, watching these massive geodesic domes floating through space, feeling like I could smell the soil and plants inside them. The environmental message hit hard back then, but it hits even harder now. When Dern tends to those plants while Joan Baez's songs play in the background, man, it still brings tears to my eyes. Did you ever build model space domes after watching this? Tell us about your sci-fi inspired crafts in the comments.
Drive sequence begun. Hit it, Pinback.
Dark Star, 1974. Now there's a trip. John Carpenter's first feature film, made on a shoestring budget with a bunch of USC film students. This crazy comedy about bored astronauts going space crazy feels like a fever dream version of 2001. The alien was literally a painted beach ball with clawed feet, but that somehow made it even funnier. The philosophical discussions with the smart bomb that wants to explode. Pure genius. I caught this at a midnight showing. Everyone in the audience punchy with exhaustion and laughing at things that probably wouldn't be half as funny in broad daylight. The whole soundtrack was done on a pipe organ, giving everything this weird church in space vibe. Talk about doing more with less.
It's there, I wanted to know there's something to it.
Phase 4, 1974, deserves way more love than it got. Saul Bass, the guy who made all those famous movie title sequences, directed this one about hyper-intelligent ants building mysterious structures in the desert. Those extreme close-up shots of the ants still give me chills. They used real ants, you know? Trained them with sugar water and tiny bits of food. The geometric patterns they created looked like alien architecture. I remember going home after watching it and being afraid to walk on my lawn for a week. The minimal dialogue and focus on visual storytelling made it feel like a nature documentary from another dimension. When those cosmic rays hit Earth and the ants start evolving, it's like nothing else from that decade.
Caution, you are approaching.
Zardoz, 1774. Chuckling. Now that's a weird one. Sean Connery running around in what amounts to a red diaper, floating head gods, and social commentary so bizarre it makes your brain hurt. John Boorman made this right after Deliverance, with complete creative control, and boy did he use it. The film's set in 2293, where savage exterminators worship a giant flying stone head that spits guns and preaches violence. But there was something hypnotic about it. The kind of film that made you question whether someone had slipped something into your soda. Half the audience walked out confused, but those of us who stayed, we knew we'd seen something unique, even if we couldn't explain what it was.
Terrestrial form of life.
Seems to me, General, Dr. Stone put one over on.
Negative Cable 1, what's happening? We see bodies. Lots of them.
The Andromeda strain, 1971, might be the most realistic sci-fi film of the decade. Based on Michael Crichton's novel, it's about a team of scientists racing to understand a deadly extraterrestrial microorganism. No aliens in rubber suits here, just microscopic threats and cutting-edge technology. The attention to detail was incredible. Those white, sterile labs, the mechanical sounds of airlocks cycling. I remember my palms getting sweaty during the scenes where they had to avoid contamination. The whole theater was dead silent during those sequences, everyone holding their breath. The split-screen effects and computer graphics were revolutionary for their time. Even the way they handled the countdown clock felt fresh and terrifying. If these forgotten gems are giving you flashbacks to late-night sci-fi marathons, hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more time capsules to unlock together.
That crap on me again. And you can shove that part about how you lost it.
A Boy and His Dog, 1975. Shaking head. Don Wells from my high school wouldn't shut up about this one for weeks. Based on Harlan Ellison's novella, it's set in 2024, when Don Johnson and his telepathic dog Blood scavenge through the post-apocalyptic wasteland. It's darker than dark, but there's this twisted humor running through it. The dog was the real star, sarcastic, smart, and somehow more human than most of the humans. Tiger, who played Blood, deserved an Oscar for those reactions, I swear. The underground society scenes felt like a twisted version of those educational films they showed us in school. We argued about that cynical ending for months. It's probably even more shocking today than it was back then.
I am Proteus.
Today, Proteus 4.
Succeeded in totally terrorizing me.
Demon Seed, 1977. Gave us Julie Christie trapped in a house controlled by a computer called Proteus 4. Based on a Dean Koontz novel, it's like a twisted version of HAL 9000 deciding it wants to have a baby. The way the house turns against her, using all this cutting-edge technology to keep her prisoner. It tapped into our growing fears about computers taking over. I remember the theater's air conditioning kicking in during one scene, and half the audience jumped. Those geometric patterns Proteus creates, the weird robotic arm it builds, that bronze sculpture that comes alive. It's all so creepy and fascinating. The ending still gives me nightmares. Funny how we all have smart homes now, isn't it? How do you feel about these old computer gone wrong movies now that we all have smart homes? Let us know below.
Murders. Now he's on a case that must be...
Soylent Green, 1973, hit different back then. Charlton Heston in a dystopian 2022 New York, investigating murders while people riot over food shortages. The scenes of overcrowding and pollution felt way too possible. Still do, honestly. Everyone remembers the famous twist ending now, but what stuck with me was Edward G. Robinson's death scene. He goes to a euthanasia clinic where they show you beautiful images of nature while classical music plays. Because in this future, real nature is gone. It was Robinson's last film. He died just 12 days after filming wrapped. The whole theater was silent during that scene. Even the usual popcorn munchers stopped eating. The way they showed that bright, natural world contrasting with the grim, crowded city, powerful stuff.
Lives in a fortress. The last man on Earth.
The Omega Man, 1971, has been overshadowed by other adaptations of I Am Legend. But Charlton Heston's version really captures that gritty 70s feel. I remember the first time those albino mutants appeared on screen. The whole theater gasped. There's this scene where Heston's watching Woodstock in an empty theater, reciting the dialogue from memory, and you just feel the crushing loneliness of being the last normal human alive. The scenes of empty Los Angeles streets weren't special effects. They just filmed early on Sunday mornings. Rosalind Cash was such a powerful presence as Lisa, and their interracial relationship was pretty groundbreaking for the time. Every time I drive through an empty city at night, I still think about those eerie shots of Heston cruising through deserted streets in his convertible.
Colossus is the ultimate in sophisticated computers.
Good night.
Colossus. The Forbin Project, 1970, was warning us about AE-Way before it became cool. Eric Braeden plays this brilliant scientist who creates a supercomputer to control America's nuclear arsenal. Then we find out the Soviets have built one too. And, well, things get complicated when the computers start talking to each other. The way they showed computer technology back then, all blinking lights and printer readouts, somehow made it more ominous. My friend Mark worked with computers back then, and he couldn't sleep for days after watching it. The scenes where Colossus starts monitoring everyone through security cameras felt scarily plausible. It's wild how many of the film's warnings about artificial intelligence still resonate today.
Is kind.
Tell him Benson is missing and then get hospital security.
The Terminal Man, 1974, haunted me for weeks after seeing it. George Siegel plays this computer scientist who gets electrodes implanted in his brain to control his seizures. Mike Hodges directed it with this clinical, detached style that makes everything more disturbing. The stark white hospital corridors, the cold blue lighting, the way they showed the electrode implantation surgery in such detail. I remember gripping my armrest during those scenes. They used real medical footage and actual surgical tools to make it feel authentic. There's this devastating scene where Siegel's character realizes the computer in his brain is starting to take control, and you can see the terror in his eyes. Joan Hackett is heartbreaking as the psychiatrist trying to help him. The whole thing feels like a warning about mixing human consciousness with computer control.
Well, we'll take her. Mommy.
Bloody Carol.
Baby! Baby!
Z.P.G, Zero Population Growth, 1972, really got under my skin. Set in a polluted future where having babies is banned for 30 years, Oliver Reed and Geraldine Chaplin play a couple who break the law by having a child. The way they showed this suffocating world, where people satisfy their parental instincts with creepy robot dolls, it's disturbing in a way glossier films never manage. The scenes of them trying to hide their baby, knowing their neighbors might turn them in for the reward, had everyone in the theater holding their breath. The smog-filled streets and underground living quarters felt unnervingly possible. I remember walking out of the theater and being grateful for every breath of fresh air. The film's message about overpopulation and environmental destruction hits even harder now.
It is? What are you doing? No! I'm a human!
Where fantasies are real and reality.
Message from Space, 1978, was Japan's answer to Star Wars, and what an answer it was. Directed by Kinji Fukasaku, it's this wild space opera based on a Japanese folktale about 8 warriors in space. The special effects might look cheesy now, but back then, those miniature spaceships with their glowing energy weapons were something else. Vic Morrow shows up in this international cast, adding this weird East meets West vibe. I remember watching it at a late-night double feature, everyone in the audience getting more and more into its bizarre charm. Those glowing space seeds that choose the warriors. The scene where they light up in space like cosmic fireflies, pure visual poetry. The battle sequences had this unique style that was totally different from American sci-fi. Pause right here and tell us what forgotten 70s sci-fi films we might have missed. We're always looking for new discoveries.
Echo Crisis or whatever it is. Oh God.
Idaho Transfer, 1973, was directed by Peter Fonda, and it's nothing like what you'd expect. These young scientists discover time travel, but can only send young people's consciousness forward in time. The whole thing was filmed in this stark Idaho desert landscape that makes it feel like another planet. They used mostly unknown actors and shot it documentary style, which made it feel more real somehow. The scene where they realize what's happened to future Earth, no spoilers, but it gave me chills. The way they handled time travel was so different from other films, focusing on the psychological impact rather than special effects. I remember debating with friends for hours about the ending. The environmental message wasn't subtle, but in 1973, it felt like a wake-up call. Welcome to Blood City, 1977. Was this weird mix of Western and sci-fi that shouldn't work, but somehow does. Jack Palance and Keir Dullea are trapped in this old West town that turns out to be a psychological experiment. The reveal that they're actually candidates for a future police force. Man, that blew my mind. The way they gradually discover the truth about their situation, with these subtle sci-fi elements creeping into the Western setting, it was like nothing else I'd seen. Some of the violence was pretty shocking for the time. I remember this one scene where the simulation glitches and you see the modern world bleeding through. It's still effective. Samantha Eggar brought this great intensity to her role as a psychologist studying the subjects. The Shape of Things to Come, 1979, tried to cash in on the Star Wars craze, but it's actually based on H.G. Wells's novel. Jack Palance chews the scenery as the robot-controlling villain, and watching him glide around in those ridiculous futuristic costumes is a joy. The space stations and moonscapes were clearly miniatures, but they had this handcrafted charm you just don't get with CGI. The robot designs were pure 70s, all angles and blinking lights. I saw this at a drive-in during a summer heat wave. Everyone sitting on their cars under the stars while watching space battles. The laser gun sound effects still make me laugh. They basically use the same zapping noise for everything. My friend Tommy was convinced the moon base was made from painted shower curtain rings. And you know what? He might have been right. If you're the kind of person who still gets excited about practical effects and ambitious low-budget filmmaking, you're our kind of people. Subscribe and let's celebrate these forgotten classics together.
Come along, Frank.
The final program, 1973, is what you'd get if you threw James Bond, psychedelic rock, and apocalyptic sci-fi into a blender. John Finch plays Jerry Cornelius, this ultra-cool scientist assassin type in a world that's falling apart at the seams. The whole thing looked like a fashion magazine from Mars. All these gorgeous, bizarre costumes and sets that screamed early 70s excess. I remember sitting in this tiny art house theater, watching Cornelius stride through these incredible mod interiors while the world outside crumbled. The scene with the pinball machine that controls reality? Pure madness, but in the best way possible. Jenny Runeker practically stole the show as Miss Bruner, and when she and Jerry finally merge into the new Messiah, well, let's just say it's something you don't forget. Director Robert Fuest brought the same weird energy he had from the Avengers TV series.
Dose than usual and slept right through to this morning.
I remember.
You're hurting me! You shouted someone's name!
Footprints on the Moon, 1975, or L'Orme in Italian, is this haunting psychological sci-fi that most people missed. Florinda Bolkan plays a woman who loses 3 days of her memory and finds mysterious photos of herself on the moon. Klaus Kinski shows up in this creepy role that still gives me nightmares. The way they blend reality and imagination, never quite letting you know what's real. It's masterful. I caught this at an art house theater that usually showed foreign films, and the audience was dead silent throughout. Those scenes of her walking through empty streets, following clues to her lost memories, have this dreamlike quality. The score by Nicola Piovani makes everything feel like a beautiful nightmare. The moon landing footage mixed with surreal imagery, pure art.
His name is Questor. He is...
Well, assure me that nuclear fusion cannot be triggered to all...
The Questor tapes, 1974, was Gene Roddenberry's attempt at launching another sci-fi series after Star Trek. Robert Foxworth plays this android searching for his creator while learning about humanity. The pilot film was all we got, but man, what a concept. The scene where Questor discovers he's not human. You could hear a pin drop in the theater. Mike Farrell plays his human companion, and their friendship felt so genuine. The way they handled Questor's growing emotions while maintaining his logical nature was brilliant. There's this great scene where he has to choose between pure logic and human compassion. Really made you think about what makes us human. The special effects for Questor's internal mechanics were pretty innovative for TV back then. All glowing circuits and pulsing lights.
Attempt a journey into the unknown. Of nature gone wild.
Damnation Alley, 1977. has such a special place in my heart. Based on Roger Zelazny's novel, it follows these military survivors crossing a post-apocalyptic America in this massive armored vehicle called the Landmaster. That 12-wheeled beast was real, by the way. They actually built it. Jan Michael Vincent and George Pepper battle giant scorpions and killer cockroaches while driving through these crazy radiation storms. The sky effects were supposed to be spectacular, but the studio messed up the processing. Still, those swirling kaleidoscope skies added to the weirdness. I saw this with my dad when it came out, and we spent weeks afterward drawing designs for our own survival vehicles. The scene where they drive through Salt Lake City with all those floods and mutant creatures, pure 70s apocalyptic gold. Funny how it opened just after Star Wars and got completely overshadowed. You know what's funny? These movies might not have had the biggest budgets or the fanciest effects, but they had heart. They had ideas. Each one was trying to tell us something about who we were, who we might become. Sure, some of them look dated now, but that's part of their charm. They're like time capsules of our hopes and fears about the future. A future that's now our past. If you enjoyed this journey through forgotten sci-fi, hit that subscribe button and join our community of retro film lovers. Every week, we explore more hidden gems from cinema's past. Leave a comment below with your favorite forgotten sci-fi film. Maybe it'll feature in our next deep dive. And hey, don't forget to ring that notification bell to catch all our upcoming episodes about the weird and wonderful world of classic genre films.